monks and monasteries spread Christianity through much of what was Europe. In the late 700s, however, one man would come along who was not a monk, but who would do more than any other person to spread Christianity and strengthen the Western Church. That man was Charles, the king of the Franks. The Franks were a group of people who lived along the Rhine River in present-day Germany. Charles was not just the king. He might have also been the tallest man in his kingdom. Charles was 6 feet 3.5 inches tall. We know that because his bones have been measured. Even by today's standards, that is tall. But in the 700s, when people were shorter, he was really tall. Charles was not only tall, he was healthy and energetic as well. He followed health advice you've probably heard all your life. He ate healthy foods, exercised every day, he loved to swim, and got plenty of rest. He liked to nap. He was a hard worker, too. He started having meetings the minute he got out of bed, before he had finished dressing. His advisors would come into his bedroom and ask him questions. Charles' greatest talent was organizing and managing people. He knew how to inspire armies to fight, and he also knew how to move them quickly from one place to another. This was an important skill for a leader in a time when there were no reliable maps. He didn't give up either. Once he started something, he finished it. He expected the same of his men. Charles enjoyed being king. Like most rulers, he enjoyed the power of ruling, but unlike some kings, he had goals beyond gaining power for himself. He wanted to spread Christianity, and he encouraged learning. These goals, and Charles' ability to make things happen, combined to make him one of the greatest rulers Europe had ever known. Charles became so great that the great became part of his name. By the time he died, people were calling him Charlemagne. Charlemagne means Charles the Great, and that is what historians today call him. The Frankish army was an impressive sight. Strong and disciplined, they wore leather vests and light armor. Their most important weapons were their swords, and Frankish soldiers treated their swords with care. Many of them had cases for their swords called scabbards, decorated with silver, gold, and even jewels. The Frankish army was very successful in battle. These strong soldiers with their glittering weapons conquered much of the territory that had once been part of the Western Roman Empire. The Moors, or Muslim North Africans, controlled most of the Iberian Peninsula, including Spain and Portugal. However, Charlemagne took parts of northern Spain, as well as most of what is now France, Germany, Switzerland, the Netherlands, Belgium, and Luxembourg. He united them into a Frankish empire. He had successes in northern Italy, too. You have already read about how the Bishop of Rome, also known as the Pope, tried to gain more power after the fall of the Western Roman Empire. You have also read that the bishops of Constantinople, Alexandria, Antioch, and Jerusalem didn't like that very much. Well, Pope Leo III had enemies even closer to home. Powerful princes from the lands around Rome grew jealous of the church's wealth and power. The Pope's enemies actually attacked him as he was walking through the streets of Rome. They pushed him to the ground, pulled off his robes, and beat him. The Pope fled Rome and appealed to Charlemagne for help. Charlemagne did not let the Pope down. He sent an army to escort the Pope back to Rome, where his soldiers punished the Pope's enemies. The following year, Charlemagne went to Rome for 2 purposes. He wanted to make sure the Pope was safe from any more attacks, and he wanted to celebrate Christmas with the Pope. It was the year 800, the beginning of a new century, and Charlemagne wanted to celebrate this special year with the Pope in St. Peter's Church. The celebration proved to be even more special than Charlemagne had dreamed possible. According to one of Charlemagne's biographers, Charlemagne prepared for a traditional Christmas Mass. When he arrived at the cathedral, he found it packed with people from all over his empire. His children were there too. When Charlemagne reached the front of the cathedral, he knelt in prayer. After a long time he stood up, and the Pope placed a crown on Charlemagne's head. The people in the church cheered. "Long life and victory to Charles Augustus, crowned by God, great and peaceful Emperor of the Romans," they cried. Reading this today, it is hard to believe that Charlemagne was surprised by being crowned by the Pope, but that's the story that has come down through the ages. The crowning of Charlemagne as emperor accomplished three things. First, it gave the Romans an emperor for the first time since 476. Second, it gave Charlemagne the blessing of the Pope. And lastly, it established that Charlemagne agreed that the Pope had the power to crown an emperor. Charlemagne expanded his empire through warfare. However, what made him great wasn't what he did on the battlefield, but rather the way he governed his empire. Charlemagne built a beautiful capital city, Aachen, in what is now northwestern Germany. He built a palace and a chapel. He also had a great library. He started a school in his palace and allowed the sons of poor people to attend, as well as the children of nobles. Charlemagne believed that women should be educated as well as men, an unusual view for his time. He even tried to provide free education for his subjects. Charlemagne was a good manager in times of peace as well as in war. He improved communication and organization throughout his empire. He sent teams of ambassadors chosen for their good character to enforce laws and solve conflicts in various parts of his empire. Like the Romans, he built roads and bridges to make trade and travel easier. When Charlemagne first began conquering the Saxons and other groups of people long before he became emperor, he tried to force them to become Christians. At first, his rule was very harsh. People who would not convert to Christianity were killed. Later in his life, however, Charlemagne realized that force was not the best way to win people over. By the 790s, he allowed his conquered subjects to make their own choices about Christianity. Charlemagne died in 814. None of the rulers who followed had his gift for leadership. However, Charlemagne set a new standard for learning and management. He helped shape what would later become some of the modern countries of Europe. The Franks originally spoke an early form of German. By the time Charlemagne died, many Franks were speaking a new language that was influenced by Latin. This language became known to English speakers as French. Over the next 200 to 300 years, the French-speaking part of Charlemagne's empire broke away to form the Kingdom of France. Charlemagne's empire continued in various forms for hundreds of years. Part of it expanded toward the east. It still included Rome, however, and a strong alliance remained between the Pope and the rulers of this German-speaking empire. In the 1200s, the Habsburg family took control of this German empire. It was at this point that it became known as the Holy Roman Empire, having been blessed by the Pope. This empire stretched roughly from the North Sea and the Baltic Sea in the north to the Mediterranean Sea in the south, and from the Rhone River in the west to beyond the Oder River in the east.